Breaking Bad is undoubtedly one of the most popular TV shows in history, heavily contributing to the rise of the era of prestige television, alongside shows such as Game of Thrones and The Sopranos. The story about a humble, cancer-stricken chemistry teacher starting a meth-dealing business and eventually turning into a menace of a drug kingpin is still widely talked about to this day. One of the most common topics of discussion surrounding this story is a question about when exactly did Walter White stop being Walter White and fully embrace the ruthless, reprehensible persona of Heisenberg. However, in my opinion, there was no singular moment when Walt decided to completely abandon his true self. Walter has been Heisenberg since day one. Before we start, remember that if you like my content, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share so that more people can see it. Make sure to click the notification button so that you never miss a new video. We meet Walt on the day of his 50th birthday and get a glimpse of his deeply unfulfilling life. He lives in an average home with a loving, if a bit nagging wife, a disabled son and a surprise baby on the way. He doesn't seem to have many close friends, sons for his brother and sister-in-law, Hank and Marie. He works as a chemistry teacher, and while it's clear that the study of matter is his deep passion, his students never quite share it and often disrespect him. Even his family seems to see him as weak and timid, and Walt often ends up as the butt of their jokes. Due to a strained financial situation, he is also forced to work part-time in a car wash. This predictable, dull life gets turned upside down when Walt, who had never once smoked a cigarette in his life, is diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. After witnessing his DEA brother-in-law's raid on meth dealers, Walt decides to try himself out in the business in order to earn enough money for his family to survive and thrive after his death. Everything I do for my family, is his mantra. Except some of the things he does in the very first episodes, even before he gives himself the signature shaved head look, directly contradict the assertion that it's solely for the family. The first seeds of his downfall, ones that, through later 5 seasons, kept sprouting until they bloomed into the monstrosity of Heisenberg. The very first seeds were, in fact, planted decades before the show even started. We learned that Walt used to be a brilliant scientist and together with his ex-best friend Elliot Schwartz co-established Grey Matter Technologies, a multi-million-dollar worth company that was awarded a Nobel Prize. Walt, however, left the project before it was a success, filling him with resentment and regrets. Skylar and Walt are invited to Elliot's birthday party, where Skylar tells him about Walt's illness. Elliot suggests that Walt rejoin the company and even offers to pay for his cancer treatment. Walt declines since he sees this as a pity offer and proceeds with plans to cook meth. Through this act, we see Walt's biggest flaw in action, his pride. At the initial stages of development of Grey Matter, Walter and Elliot's wife Gretchen actually dated, but Walt felt inferior to her coming from money, which was the actual reason why he broke up with her and left the company in the first place. Pride wounded. Then Grey Matter becomes a success without Walt. Pride wounded. When he brings this up with Gretchen years later, he accuses the two of them of cutting him off, but Gretchen rightfully points out that he abandoned them on his own volition.
You and Elliot cut me out.
What? You walked away. You abandoned us. Me, Elliot.
Little rich girl just adding to your millions.
Walt left because his pride was wounded. It was the wounded pride and his massive ego that was his fatal flaw even all those years ago. And this comes tumbling down when he rejects their offer to pay for the cancer treatment. Here lies the first direct contradiction to the "I did this for the family" mantra. Because if Walter was truly acting out of his love for his family, he would put them above his own pride. He would humble himself and accept that offer rather than become a criminal and endanger them every second of every day. But because accepting a handout would mean a wounded pride, he declines. From the very beginning, Walt was acting solely in order to fulfill his pride, to reclaim the legacy that he felt he lost. What initially is supposed to be a short-time endeavor predictably turns into a long-time project, for Walt realizes that he can't just enter the criminal world and leave completely unscathed. He dives deeper and deeper into this world, realizing that he finally got what he lacked in life: purpose, legacy, power. Assuming the elusive persona of Heisenberg, Walt builds a drug empire, fully immersing himself in the new identity. Most of the time, Walt continues to insist that all the drug dealing he does is for the sake of his family, to earn money for them, often being dismissive of how a job of a meth cook isn't necessarily suited for a man with a wife and 2 children.
I will kill your wife. I will kill your son. I will kill your infant daughter.
Walt entangles himself in the web of lies, and when it seems like he climbed to the very top, his meticulous plans come crashing down all at once. Throughout the series, Walt is repeatedly offered a way out, but he declines every time, even when he has enough money for his family to live richly for the rest of their lives. Walt's final defeat comes the moment when, once again, pride gets the best of him. Hank is convinced that Walt's accomplice Gale is actually Heisenberg, but Walt cannot stand that someone took credit for his work, so he subtly implies to Hank that Heisenberg may still be around. This is what causes Hank to finally realize that it's Walt who's Heisenberg. Hank wounded Walt's pride, so he had to act. Everything comes tumbling down like a domino. Walt loses everything. And even when he seemingly resigns himself to his fate, it's his pride that causes him to return to his hometown and tie the loose ends. In the penultimate episode, Walt sees Gretchen and Elliot being interviewed, and Elliot insinuates that Walt's contribution to the company was just the name.
So what was Walter White's contribution?
You know, to be honest, honey,
The company name.
the company name. We came up with it by combining our names. Schwartz means black, black plus white makes gray.
It's gray matter technologies.
Exactly.
Pride wounded. In the series' last episode, Walt decides to visit his estranged wife, Skyler. When it seems like he is about to use his go-to excuse about how he did all of this for the sake of his family, he finally admits what we should have already known.
All the things that I did. You need to understand.
I have to hear one more time that you did this for the family.
I did it for me. I liked it. I was good at it. And I was really I was alive.
This line proves that Walt and Heisenberg were never separate entities, that Heisenberg was not just an alter ego, but an aspect of Walt hidden deep within him all his life, and it was the circumstances he found himself in that allowed that darkness to rise to the surface. A famous axiom by John Dalberg Acton says that all power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Would it mean that every single person in history who ever held power eventually got corrupted by it? Is power truly something that even the best, most honorable people will never be able to resist? Is power inherently something anyone with a moral compass needs to avoid? A modification of said axiom by Robert A. Caro seems to reflect the complexity of reality much better. Power always reveals. When a man is climbing, trying to persuade others to give him power, concealment is necessary. But as a man obtains more power, camouflage becomes less necessary. What this means is that power has a unique way of revealing one's character. The moment one achieves power, one's true nature floats on top. A man without power needs to keep appearances, needs to constrain himself out of fear of retaliation. He answers to those above him and might be met with unwanted consequences. Some concealing is necessary. But once he climbs the ladder and there is nobody above him, the power he amasses means he no longer has to pretend. All the masks fall and he reveals who he truly was all along. The case of Walter White is exactly that. Walt is, at first, understandably clumsy in the world of crime, but he adapts to it surprisingly quickly. Initially, Walt only harms others in self-defense, but already in Season 2, he is not above taking calculated steps that further his own goals, even if it means death and subsequent suffering of those closest to him. The best example of this is when Jesse, his meth-dealing partner, wishes to sever his ties with him. To ensure his cooperation and absolute loyalty to him and him alone, Walt intentionally does nothing when he sees Jesse's girlfriend overdose and choke to death on her own vomit. From that point onward, Walt stops at nothing to stay on top. He will intimidate, murder, and threaten anyone into cooperation. He will ruthlessly deal with his enemies and will not spare innocents in order to get what he wants, including children. Power revealed him as a man whose own pride prevented him from achieving success, a man whose pride was so insatiable that he sabotaged just about everything that he had built. This is why Walt was Heisenberg all along. The moment Walt receives his cancer diagnosis, he is faced with the reality that he wasted his entire life, did nothing of significance, allowed all of the opportunities to slip from his hands. When he participates in Hank's raid, he gets a glimpse of the world that he could belong to, a glimpse of all the possibilities he missed, almost like a chance of redemption, to make his life worth something, even if it's in the worst possible way. Using the convenient excuse of doing this all for his family, Walt reaches high and then falls, losing everything in the process, but ultimately dying somewhat fulfilled, achieving some morbid success, leaving behind some legacy. And while indeed, at first he seems to genuinely believe that he did all of this for the sake of the family, eventually even he realized the truth. He did it all for himself. He liked it. He was good at it. Thanks for watching. Remember that if you like my content, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share so that more people can see it. Make sure to click the notification button so that you never miss a new video.